Chapter 1. The Spark of Rebellion. The oppressive heat of the lower levels clung to Mara's skin as she navigated the crowded, dimly lit streets of Neo-Arcadia. The air, thick with the acrid stench of pollution, burned her lungs with each labored breath. Yet, despite the bleak surroundings, a spark of defiance burned within her, fueled by the injustice that had become the fabric of daily life. As Mara hurried through the crumbling tenements, the sounds of the city's upper layers, the hum of sleek hover transports and the distant chime of affluent pedestrians served as a constant reminder of the stark divide that bifurcated this once great metropolis. She had spent her entire life confined to the lower levels, struggling to secure basic necessities, while the privileged elite in the towering spires above lived in opulence, their lives untouched by the hardships that plagued the masses. Today, however, was different. Word had spread quickly through the network of dissident whispers that a protest was being organized in the central square, a rare act of public dissent against the regime's heavy-handed control. Mara knew the risks, but the promise of defiance was too alluring to ignore. As she drew closer to the gathering crowd, she could feel the electric tension in the air, a palpable mix of fear and determination. Joining the throng of protesters, Mara felt a surge of solidarity, her solitary voice merging with the collective cry for justice. The chants echoed through the square, a defiant refrain that reverberated against the towering buildings that loomed overhead. Equal access to resources, an end to oppression. But the moment of unity was shattered when the armored enforcers of the regime descended upon the crowd, their advanced riot gear and energy batons glinting in the harsh light. Mara watched in horror as the peaceful demonstration descended into chaos, the enforcers ruthlessly subduing the protesters with brutal efficiency. She gasped as she witnessed a young man, his face bloodied and his cries of pain silenced by a swift blow to the abdomen. Instinctively, Mara moved to aid him, but a firm hand on her shoulder held her back. She turned to see the stern, weathered face of Anya, a woman Mara had known for years, a trusted member of the underground resistance network. "We must retreat," Anya said, her voice terse but laced with concern. "The enforcers will show no mercy." Mara's heart raced as she reluctantly allowed Anya to guide her through the disintegrating protest, weaving between the fleeing masses and the advancing enforcers. The sound of stun weapons discharging and the agonized cries of the injured echoed in her ears, a jarring symphony of the regime's iron-fisted control. As they reached the relative safety of a nearby alley, Mara leaned against the crumbling wall, her chest heaving. She had known the risks, but the brutality of the crackdown had left her shaken, the idealistic vision of a peaceful uprising now tainted by the harsh realities of their oppression. "This can't go on," Mara said, her voice quivering with a mixture of anger and determination. "We have to fight back." Anya regarded her with a solemn expression. "The time is coming, but we must be patient and we must be strategic. The regime's grip on power is too strong to challenge head-on. We need a plan, a way to undermine their control from the shadows." Mara nodded, her resolve hardening. She knew Anya was right. The path forward would not be an easy one, but the alternative, a lifetime of subservience and suffering, was unacceptable. As the two women made their way through the darkened alleys, Mara's mind raced with the possibilities. She had seen the grim reality of the regime's ruthlessness, but she had also glimpsed the power of collective action, the defiant spirit that stirred within the oppressed masses. If they could harness that energy, channel it into a coordinated resistance, perhaps they could tip the scales and forge a new, more equitable future for Neo-Arcadia. Mara's steps quickened, the weight of the city's future resting on her shoulders. She would not allow the flame of hope to be extinguished, not while she still had the strength to fan its embers. The spark had been lit, and with Anya by her side, Mara was determined to ignite a revolution. As they reached their hideout, a dilapidated basement tucked away from prying eyes, Mara knew that the path ahead would be arduous and perilous. But in the face of such overwhelming adversity, she found solace in the words of an old resistance proverb. "The greatest acts of courage are born in the darkest of times." With a steadfast determination, Mara began to lay the groundwork for a movement that would challenge the very foundations of the regime's power. a rebellion that would reverberate through the layers of Neo-Arcadia and inspire the oppressed masses to rise up and reclaim their rightful place in the city they called home. Chapter 2: Gathering the Resistance. Mara's fingers flew across the holographic interface, her eyes scanning the encrypted messages from her network of trusted contacts. The covert rebel movement she had meticulously built over the past months was finally starting to take shape, but she knew the true test lay ahead. Anya, her second-in-command and closest ally, entered the dimly lit safe house, her steps quick and purposeful. "The last of the recruits have been vetted and are ready for assignment," she reported, her voice low and urgent. "Liam has the new equipment you requested ready to be deployed." Mara nodded, the weight of responsibility heavy on her shoulders. "Good. We need to move quickly before Magnus catches wind of our activities." She paused, considering their next steps. "Have Liam ready the sabotage devices and get the team in position. We strike the resource distribution center tonight." Anya's eyes widened slightly, but she did not hesitate. "Understood. I'll coordinate the operation." As she turned to leave, Mara reached out and grasped her arm. "Be careful, Anya. I can't afford to lose you." The unspoken fear in her voice was palpable. Anya's expression softened. "We'll make it through this, Mara. I promise." With a nod, she slipped out of the safe house, leaving Mara alone with her thoughts. In the gleaming upper layers of Neo-Arcadia, Kai stood at the window of his high-rise apartment, gazing out at the bustling cityscape below. The air was crisp and clean, the result of the advanced filtration systems that kept the privileged residents insulated from the pollution and contamination that plagued the lower levels. Kai had grown up among the upper-layer elite, his brilliant mind and technical expertise propelling him to the forefront of the city's scientific research. But as he watched the robotic drones efficiently distributing resources, he couldn't shake the nagging sense of unease that had been growing within him. A series of encrypted messages flashed on his personal terminal, and Kai quickly scanned through the information. His brow furrowed as he digested the details of a recent rebel attack on a resource distribution center. The reports were sketchy, but it was clear the rebel network was becoming bolder in their actions. Kai paced the length of his apartment, his mind racing. He could not ignore the growing inequality and suffering in the lower layers, nor could he justify the regime's heavy-handed tactics to maintain control. Carefully, he began to draft a message, his fingers hesitating only briefly before hitting the send command. The streets of the lower layers were alive with the hustle and bustle of daily life, but the tension was palpable. Mika, a pragmatic resident of the crumbling tenements, kept her head down as she navigated the crowded alleys, her focus fixed on the task at hand. She reached the designated safe house, her eyes scanning the area for any signs of trouble before slipping inside. Liam, the tech-savvy rebel, greeted her with a nod. "Did you get the supplies I requested?" he asked, his fingers already tapping away at a holographic interface. Mika nodded, handing over a bag filled with salvaged electronics and spare parts. "It wasn't easy, but I managed to scavenge what you needed." She paused, her gaze hardening. "The patrols are getting worse. We need to be more careful." Liam's expression darkened. "I know. Mara's planning something big tonight, and we can't afford any mistakes." He glanced up from his work, his eyes meeting Mika's. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Mika hesitated, the weight of the decision she had made pressing heavily on her conscience. I don't know, but I can't stand by and watch our people suffer any longer." She steeled her resolve, squaring her shoulders. "What do you need me to do?" A faint smile tugged at the corners of Liam's lips. "Welcome to the resistance, Mika." Kai's message had been brief, but the recipient knew exactly what it meant. Within hours, a coded response arrived, and Kai felt a surge of both anticipation and trepidation. He had taken a significant risk in reaching out to the rebel network, but the thought of remaining idle while the injustice and oppression continued to ravage the lower layers was unacceptable. As night fell, Kai slipped out of his apartment, navigating the eerily quiet upper-layer streets with a practiced ease. He arrived at a nondescript building, its facade blending seamlessly into the surrounding architecture. A panel slid open, and Kai stepped inside, the door closing silently behind him. Amara stood in the dimly lit corridor. her piercing gaze scrutinizing him. "You came," she said simply, her tone guarded. Kai nodded, the weight of the moment palpable. I want to help. I can't stand by and watch this anymore." He paused, his eyes pleading. "Please, let me assist the rebellion. I can provide valuable intel and resources." Amara regarded him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Finally, she gave a curt nod. "Very well. Follow me." As they descended deeper into the rebel safe house, Kai felt a surge of both trepidation and resolve. He was taking the first steps on a path that would irrevocably change the course of his life and the fate of the city. The night air was thick with tension as the rebel strike team gathered in the shadows, their breaths barely audible. Mara stood before them, her face etched with a fierce determination. "Tonight, we strike a blow against the regime's resource control. This is our chance to disrupt the flow of power and resources to the upper layers." She swept her gaze across the assembled rebels, her voice low and intense. "Remember, our mission is to sabotage, not to engage in direct combat unless absolutely necessary. We need to be quick, precise, and above all, invisible." Anya stepped forward, her expression grim. "The resource distribution center is heavily guarded, but Liam has provided us with the tools we need to bypass the security measures." She nodded to a table laden with an array of specialized equipment. Mara turned to her second in command, her eyes conveying the unspoken weight of the task. "Lead the team. I'll remain here to coordinate and provide backup if needed." Anya placed a reassuring hand on Mara's shoulder. "We won't let you down." With a final nod, she gathered the team and led them out into the night, their footsteps swallowed by the darkness. Mara watched them go, her heart pounding in her chest. The fate of the rebellion and the future of Neo-Arcadia hung in the balance. Chapter 3: An Unlikely Alliance. Mara sat in the dimly lit command center, her brow furrowed as she reviewed the latest intel from their covert operations. Despite the rebels' initial successes in disrupting the upper layers' resource control systems, the regime's crackdown had been relentless. Magnus, the ruthless overseer, had ratcheted up security measures and surveillance across the city, making it increasingly difficult for the resistance to operate without detection. As Mara pored over the maps and data, a subtle movement in the corner of her eye caught her attention. Anya, her trusted second-in-command, approached with a concerned expression. "Mara, we need to talk. There's someone who wants to meet with us, an upper-layer scientist, claiming he has information that could help our cause." Mara's eyes narrowed, her instinctive distrust of the privileged upper classes flaring to the surface. "An upper layer?" she spat. "Why should we trust anything they have to say?" Anya held up a calming hand. I know. But this one, he seems different, Mara. He's been providing us with sensitive information about the Resource Control Center, and his latest intel could be a game changer." Mara let out a heavy sigh, her fingers drumming against the table as she considered the implications. "All right, set up the meeting, but I want you and Liam there, and we'll be ready to move if it's a trap." Later that evening, Mara, Anya, and Liam gathered in a secluded warehouse, awaiting the arrival of their mysterious upper-layer contact. The sound of footsteps approaching had them all tensing, hands gripping their concealed weapons. A figure emerged from the shadows, and Mara felt a flicker of recognition. "You're Kai," the man interrupted, his voice calm and measured. "I'm glad you agreed to this meeting." Anya stepped forward, her posture guarded. "What do you want, and how do you know so much about our operation?" Kai raised his hands in a gesture of surrender. "I'm here to help. I've been watching your movement for some time, and I believe I can provide you with the means to strike a decisive blow against the regime." Mara eyed him skeptically. "And why would an upper layer like you want to help us? What's in it for you?" Kai's expression darkened. "Because I can no longer stand by and watch the suffering of the lower layers. The inequality and resource hoarding in this city. It's wrong, and I want to be a part of the solution." Liam, the tech-savvy rebel, leaned forward, his interest piqued. "What kind of solution are you talking about?" Kai reached into his coat and pulled out a small device, its surface gleaming with intricate circuitry. "This is a prototype of a new air and water purification system I've been developing. It has the potential to revolutionize resource distribution across the city, breaking down the barriers between the upper and lower layers." Mara's eyes widened as she studied the device, her fingers itching to get her hands on it. If this works, it could be the key to equalizing access to basic necessities. But why would you risk everything to help us? Kai's gaze met hers, his eyes filled with a rare intensity. Because I've seen the suffering in the lower layers, and I can no longer ignore it. I want to be a part of creating a better future for all of us, not just the privileged few. Anya and Liam exchanged a cautious look, the weight of Kai's words hanging in the air. Mara studied the man before her, searching for any sign of deception. After a long moment, she nodded. All right, we'll work with you. But if this is a trick, if you betray us— It won't be, Kai interrupted, his voice firm. I give you my word. The rebel leaders reluctantly agreed to the alliance, their initial mistrust slowly giving way to cautious optimism. Kai provided them with detailed schematics of the Resource Control Center, revealing critical weaknesses in the system's security. With this information, the rebels began to plan their most daring operation yet, a coordinated strike that would cripple the regime's ability to hoard and ration the city's resources. As the preparations unfolded, tensions within the rebel group simmered. Liam and some of the more hardline members remained skeptical of Kai's true motives, while others, like Anya, saw the potential in the upper-layer scientist's expertise. Mara found herself caught in the middle, her revolutionary ideals warring with the pragmatic need to seize this opportunity. Late one night, as Mara pored over the plans with Kai, the scientist turned to her, his expression earnest. Mara, I know you have every reason to doubt me, but I want you to know that I'm truly committed to this cause. I've seen the way my people live, are blind to the suffering of those in the lower layers, and I can't stand by and watch it anymore. This is my chance to make a difference, to help create a better future for all of us. Mara studied him, searching for any sign of deception. After a long moment, she nodded slowly. All right, Kai, I believe you. But if you betray us, there will be consequences. Kai let out a breath, the tension in his shoulders easing. I understand. I won't let you down. As the rebels and their unlikely upper-layer ally worked tirelessly to prepare for their most ambitious operation yet, the stakes continued to rise. Magnus, the ruthless overseer, had grown increasingly paranoid, ordering ever harsher crackdowns on dissent. The city was a powder keg, and the rebels knew that their window of opportunity was closing. The moment of reckoning was fast approaching, and the future of Neo-Arcadia hung in the balance. Chapter 4. The Tide Turns. Amara stood at the command center, her eyes fixed on the grainy surveillance feeds displayed across the screens. The rebel network had grown stronger than ever, their attacks disrupting the resource distribution systems throughout the lower and mid-levels of Neo-Arcadia. She could sense the shift in the tide, a growing sense of hope among the underclass that had long been oppressed. Liam, what's the status on the purification systems we've integrated? Amara asked, her voice tinged with a rare note of optimism. The young technician's fingers danced across the control panel, his brow furrowed in concentration. The air and water filtration units are operating at maximum efficiency. We're diverting resources to the most critical areas, and the people in the lower layers are reporting better air quality and cleaner water. Amara nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. Kai's technology had been a game changer, allowing the rebels to not only disrupt the regime's resource control, but also provide immediate relief to the suffering masses. And the upper layers? She pressed. Are they feeling the effects yet? Liam's expression darkened. Magnus has ordered a tightening of the rationing protocols. The upper layer elites are growing increasingly paranoid, hoarding what resources they can. But the cracks are starting to show. The distribution networks can't keep up with the demand. Good. Amara's voice was grim, her eyes narrowing. The more the upper layers feel the strain, the more they'll be forced to confront the truth of their system. She paused, her mind racing. Have we made any progress on infiltrating the central control hub? A flicker of uncertainty crossed Liam's features. It's still heavily fortified, Amara. Magnus has doubled the security since our last attack. Getting in there undetected will be nearly impossible. Amara's jaw tightened. We have to try. That control hub is the key to maintaining the division between the layers. If we can seize it, we can finally bring true equality to this city. Liam nodded, his expression resolute. I'll coordinate with Anya and the others. We'll find a way, Amara. I promise. As Liam hurried off to relay the orders, Amara turned her gaze back to the screens, her mind already racing with the details of the plan. The rebellion had gained significant ground, but she knew that the final push would be the most perilous. Magnus would not relinquish his power without a fight, and the stakes had never been higher. Across the city, Kai sat alone in his dimly lit laboratory, his fingers drumming anxiously on the workbench. The news of the rebels' success had both elated and terrified him. On one hand, he could scarcely believe the impact that his purification technology had made, bringing relief and hope to the long-suffering lower layers. But on the other, he knew that the regime would not take this challenge to its authority lightly. Kai rose from his chair and began to pace, his mind whirling. He had always prided himself on his neutrality, on his ability to remain detached from the political turmoil that gripped Neo-Arcadia. But now he found himself torn. His conscience could no longer ignore the injustice that permeated the very foundations of the city he called home. I can't keep sitting on the sidelines, Kai murmured, his resolve hardening. If I have the power to make a difference, then I have an obligation to act. With that, he turned towards his workbench, his fingers flying across the controls as he began to integrate his latest innovations into a new prototype. This time, the technology would not be used merely to alleviate the symptoms of the regime's oppression. It would be a tool to strike at the heart of the problem. In his private chambers, Magnus paced like a caged animal, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of his desk. The reports from the lower layers were deeply troubling, painting a picture of a rebellion that was quickly spiraling out of his control. How could this have happened? He snarled, his eyes narrowing. I thought I had crushed every last ember of dissent. One of his lieutenants, a stoic-faced military commander, stepped forward. Sir, the rebels have somehow obtained advanced purification technology. They're disrupting our resource distribution networks and empowering the lower classes. Magnus slammed his fist onto the desk, the force of the blow sending papers scattering. Then we'll cut off their resources entirely, shut down the filtration systems, ration the water and air even further. Let's see how long their little uprising can last without the bare necessities of life. The lieutenant shifted uncomfortably. That could be disastrous, sir. If we deprive the lower layers, it may spark a full-scale riot that we can't contain. Magnus's eyes glinted with a dangerous edge. Then we'll meet any unrest with overwhelming force. I will not allow this city to crumble under the weight of this rebellion. Do whatever it takes to crush these dissidents. I want them eliminated, no matter the cost. The lieutenant nodded, his expression grim. It will be done, sir. As he left the chamber, Magnus sank into his chair, his fingers massaging his temples. The rebellion was spiraling out of his control, threatening to unravel the very foundations of the society he had so carefully constructed. He would not allow it. Even if it meant tearing Neo-Arcadia apart, he would maintain his grip on power at all costs. Chapter 5. The Heart of the City. The streets of Neo-Arcadia's upper layers pulsed with a frenzied energy as the rebel assault on the central control hub unfolded. Amara and her core team had infiltrated the heavily fortified facility, determined to seize control of the city's core resource distribution systems. Kai worked tirelessly at a terminal, his fingers flying across the hollow interface as he attempted to override the complex security protocols. I'm in, but the system is hardened against intrusion. Magnus has spared no expense to protect this place. Anya, Amara's second-in-command, peered out from their cover, her assault rifle at the ready. We've got company. Magnus has deployed his elite guards to the main entrance. Amara gripped her weapon tightly, her eyes narrowing with determination. We knew this would be the toughest fight. Everyone, get ready. Liam, have you rigged the charges? The tech-savvy rebel nodded, a grim expression on his face. Affirmative. As soon as Kai gives the signal, we'll bring the whole place down. Kai's brow furrowed in concentration as he continued to hack the system. Almost there. Just a few more layers of encryption to break through. Magnus, the ruthless overseer of Neo-Arcadia, paced the control room, his features contorted with rage. Increase security at all access points. Seal off the lower levels if necessary. I will not let these insurgents destroy everything I've built." His subordinates scrambled to carry out his orders, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and loyalty. Magnus turned to the main holo display, which showed the ongoing battle raging across the upper layers. "They've come too far, but I'll be damned if I let them take the heart of this city. This ends today." Amara's team surged forward, their weapons blazing as they fought to push past the elite guards blocking their path. The sound of gunfire echoed through the corridor, punctuated by the occasional explosion as Liam's carefully placed explosives detonated. Kai's fingers danced across the terminal, his eyes narrowed in focus. "I'm in. I've overridden the main security protocols. Liam, blow the charges now." Liam's thumb moved to the detonator, but he hesitated, his gaze meeting Amara's. "Are you sure about this? If we bring down the control hub, the entire upper layer could collapse." Amara's expression was resolute, her voice steady. "We have no choice. The whole city is at stake." "Do it, Liam." With a nod, Liam pressed the detonator, and a series of thunderous explosions rocked the facility. The ground trembled, and the holo displays flickered as the power grid faltered. Magnus watched in horror as the security systems failed, his grip on the city slipping through his fingers. "No. All units, converge on the control hub. Neutralize the rebels at all costs." Amara and her team surged forward, using the chaos to their advantage. They fought their way through the crumbling corridors, Kai's purification technology aiding their advance as they breached the inner sanctum of the control hub. Magnus, his face contorted with rage, stood at the center of the room, his personal guards surrounding him. "You fools. Do you really think you can topple the regime I've spent decades building?" Amara leveled her weapon at the overseer, her gaze unwavering. "It's over, Magnus. Your reign of terror ends here." Magnus sneered, his hand reaching for a concealed weapon. "You have no idea the forces you're up against. This city will burn before I let you take it from me." The battle that ensued was brutal and merciless, the rebels and Magnus's guards exchanging a flurry of gunfire. Amara and Magnus engaged in a personal conflict, their blades clashing as they fought for the fate of the city. Kai, his eyes wild with determination, raced to the main control console, his fingers flying across the interface. "I'm taking control of the resource distribution network. Hold them off, Amara." Amara gritted her teeth, her muscles straining as she parried Magnus's savage strikes. "Hurry, Kai. We can't hold them off much longer." Magnus's face was contorted with madness, his eyes gleaming with a fanatical light. "This city is mine. I will never surrender it to the likes of you." As the battle raged on, the ground shook with the intensity of the fighting. Amara and Magnus were evenly matched, their blades clashing in a deadly dance. But Kai's efforts at the control console were bearing fruit, and slowly but surely, the resource distribution systems began to shift, the balance of power tilting in the rebels' favor. Magnus, sensing the tide turning against him, let out a primal scream of rage. "No, I won't let you take everything from me." In a desperate last stand, Magnus lunged at Amara, his blade poised to strike. But Amara was ready, and with a swift, decisive move, she disarmed the overseer, her own blade finding its mark. Magnus staggered, his eyes wide with shock, as he realized the extent of his defeat. "Impossible. This can't be happening." Amara stood over the fallen overseer, her expression grim. "It's over, Magnus. Your reign of terror is at an end." As the echoes of the battle faded, Kai's voice rang out, triumphant. "I've done it. The resource distribution systems are now under our control. The upper layers are coming back online, and the lower levels are finally receiving their fair share." Amara turned to her team, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "Then it's time to rebuild. For too long, the people of Neo-Arcadia have suffered under the weight of this oppressive regime. Now, we have the chance to create a better future, one where all are equal and no one is left behind." The rebels cheered, their spirits lifted by the hard-won victory. As they began the arduous task of securing the city and restoring order, Amara knew that the real work had only just begun. But for now, they had taken the heart of Neo-Arcadia, and the path to a new and more equitable future lay open before them. Chapter 6: A New Beginning. The dust had barely settled over Neo-Arcadia's war-torn upper layers when Amara and her rebel allies set to work, determined to forge a new path forward for the shattered city. The hard-fought victory had come at a tremendous cost, and the enormity of the task ahead weighed heavily on their shoulders. Amara stood at the edge of the newly liberated central control hub, her eyes sweeping over the sprawling megacity. The once gleaming towers of the upper layers now bore the scars of battle, their pristine facades crumbling under the strain of the rebellion. Below, the lower levels remained shrouded in the familiar haze of pollution, a constant reminder of the deep-rooted inequalities that had fueled the uprising. With Kai's help, the rebels had managed to seize control of the critical infrastructure that had long sustained the regime's power. Now, the challenge was to dismantle the entrenched systems of resource distribution and redesign them to serve the interests of all Neo-Arcadian citizens, not just the privileged elite. "It's going to take time, but we have to get this right," Amara murmured, her brow furrowed in concentration. Anya, her trusted second-in-command, stood by her side, her own expression a mix of determination and wariness. "The upper layers won't go down without a fight," Anya said, her gaze drifting towards the remaining pockets of resistance. "Magnus and his loyalists are still out there, and they'll do whatever it takes to regain control." Amara nodded, her jaw tightening. "We knew this wouldn't be easy, but we've come too far to back down now. We have to show the people that a better future is possible, one where everyone has a voice and a fair share of the city's resources." Kai approached them, his eyes bright with a newfound sense of purpose. "The first step is to divert resources to the lower layers, starting with the most critical needs: clean air, water, and food. I've been working on streamlining the distribution systems, but it's going to take time to undo decades of imbalance." "Time is a luxury we may not have," Amara replied, her gaze hardening. "Magnus and his cronies will be regrouping, and we need to act fast to consolidate our control before they can mount a counterattack." Liam, the tech-savvy rebel, joined the group, his hands still smudged with grease from the arduous work of hacking the city's control systems. "We've managed to secure the main distribution hubs, but there are still pockets of resistance in the mid-levels. We need to find a way to keep the upper layers from cutting off the lower levels completely." Amara's eyes narrowed, her mind racing. "Anya, gather a team and fortify our positions in the mid-levels. We need to maintain a reliable flow of resources until we can fully integrate the distribution network. Liam, work with Kai to find a way to divert power and purification systems to the lower layers. We need to show the people that change is coming and that we're on their side." As her team sprang into action, Amara turned her gaze towards the distant horizon, where the crumbling remains of Magnus's regime loomed. The path ahead was fraught with challenges, but the glimmer of hope in her heart had never burned brighter. In the days that followed, the streets of Neo-Arcadia began to stir with a newfound energy. The residents of the lower layers, long accustomed to scavenging and scraping by, now found themselves the recipients of a steady stream of clean water, nutritious food, and even the occasional reprieve from the choking pollution. Amara and her allies worked tirelessly, forging alliances with sympathetic upper-layer citizens and negotiating the delicate balance of power. It was a slow and arduous process, punctuated by sporadic bursts of violence as Magnus's remnants continued to resist the changes. Kai's expertise proved invaluable, as he helped streamline the resource distribution systems and integrate Amara's revolutionary ideals with the practical realities of running a city on the brink of collapse. Together, they devised strategies to gradually increase the flow of resources to the lower layers, while also strengthening the city's defenses against further attacks. In the midst of the reconstruction efforts, Amara found herself drawn to the stories of the people she had once fought to liberate. She listened intently as they shared their dreams for a better future, their voices no longer tinged with the desperation of survival, but with a newfound sense of hope. It was in these moments that Amara realized the true magnitude of the task at hand. Rebuilding a shattered society was not merely a matter of redistributing resources or dismantling the old power structures. It was a delicate and painstaking process of mending the deep wounds of a fractured community, of restoring a sense of shared purpose and collective responsibility. As the weeks turned into months, the citizens of Neo-Arcadia began to witness the tangible results of the rebellion. The air grew cleaner, the water purer, and the scarcity that had once defined their daily lives slowly gave way to a more equitable distribution of resources. The upper layers, once insulated from the struggles of the lower classes, now found themselves compelled to participate in the rebuilding effort, their privilege no longer a shield against the realities of the city's shared destiny. Amara watched this transformation with a mix of pride and trepidation. She knew that the road ahead would be long and arduous, filled with setbacks and challenges that would test the resolve of every Neo-Arcadian. But as she stood at the balcony of the newly established center of governance, gazing out over the sprawling city, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. "We've come so far," she murmured, her voice barely audible above the sounds of construction and the stirrings of a reawakened community. "But the true work has only just begun."